All right, this is the second passage that we're reading today. It's called Excerpt from Wolf in the Alley by Rosemary Laughlin. Make sure that you're annotating while you're reading. You can pause the video at any point. It's ringing, don't you hear it? Hurry, Paul. Skidding on those loose cinders, Paul Schneider shot down the alley and around to the front of the house. Banging through the screen door, he lunged for the jangling telephone. Hello? Polly? What took you so long? Mama's German-accented voice was suspicious. Paul tried not to sound out of breath. I was out looking for the Iceman. That was not a lie. One could look for the Iceman while practicing baseball pitches with Tony. And Anton? He's on the lookout with me. Have you finished your schoolwork? Asked Mama. Are the potatoes peeled for supper? Our Sunday shoes have not yet to be polished. You must teach Anton how to do that just the way Papa always wanted. Mama's directions went on and on. Paul held the receiver away from his ear. He didn't want to hear what he knew would be her parting words. No baseball. It is a waste of time only for the idle rich. He interrupted so he wouldn't have to disobey. I think I hear the Iceman now. I'll see you at supper, Mama. Everything is fine. Fine. No, things weren't. Papa had died in the spring, and now Mama managed his tailor shop in downtown Omaha, speaking English as best she could while desperately trying to make ends meet. 3 older brothers were learning trades, and another was in the Franciscan seminary. Paul's sister Clara had run the house until she enrolled in business school. Now she was gone all day, too, so doing the household chores fell to the youngest boys after school. Paul knew what he wanted to be, a major league baseball player. Everyone said he had the makings of a star pitcher. He even had the chance to play for a league team next summer. The step after that was for pay. But Mama said no. Always the same reason, not worthwhile. For the idle rich. She couldn't see sports any other way. Angry and quite sorry for himself, Paul grumbled as he went back out to find Tony. Several days later, a college student appeared at the door. When Joseph entered the seminary, he'd left an empty bed at home. Mama advertised for a boarder. Frank Mollusk was studying at Cretin University and wanted a quiet place with wholesome food. Mama liked him. So did the boys. They quickly discovered Frank was friendly and funny. He told them lots of stories about his hometown in rural Nebraska, where Bohemians, Russians, and Poles had settled. The immigrant families got along fine, but because everyone spoke so little English, there were always silly misunderstandings that became hilarious the way Frank told the story. When Frank described the difficulty of playing baseball in 4 languages, Paul confided his own baseball ambitions. So you're pretty good, Frank said. Oh, he is, Tony burst out loyally, but Mama won't let him join a team. She doesn't even want him to practice. She calls from the tailor shop to check that we're in the house and not playing catch in the alley. One of these days I'm going to break a leg racing in, Paul grumped. Frank laughed. Take me out to the ball game, he bellowed out in a voice that was very loud and off-key. Hey, tell you what, Frank said. I'll study by the phone and rig a line to a bell on the sill of the window by the alley. You'll never miss hearing the phone ring again. I can pull the bell before the first ring is finished, and you can be in by the 3rd. She'll never know. Paul and Tony agreed. What Mama didn't know couldn't hurt her, but it could hurt to keep a good pitcher from polishing his skill. Frank's scheme worked. The first time Mama phoned, Frank jerked the bell line, and Paul was in before the 3rd ring started. A week of phone calls passed. Paul and Tony figured Mama would soon trust them so much she would stop calling, but they wouldn't let up their guard. Mama was strict and tough. One crisp afternoon, Frank's bell sent Paul racing to the house. He rushed through the door, but the phone wasn't ringing. Maybe a customer interrupted her, said Frank, looking up from his books. Better stay a few minutes and catch the first ring when she calls back, Paul waited, but soon grew restless and returned to the alley. The bell rang. Paul ran. Silence again. After another instance, Paul and Tony caught on. That Frank, said Paul. He wants a story to tell his buddies back home. We hear about them. They hear about us. Tony nodded. Like the Aesop's fable in our reader about the boy who cries wolf to see the villagers run. The 2 marched in to Frank. Paul scowled. So you like to see me race and skid? You like my red, sweaty face? Too bad, Frank. No more. Frank laughed heartily. You're a scream to watch, Paul. I couldn't resist. But enough is enough. I'm kind. I won't fool you again. 5 minutes later, the bell rang steadily on its pull line. He must think we're stupid, said Tony. He signaled for a curveball. Frank appeared as a fastball smoked into Tony's glove. Boys, he said, your mom just called. Why didn't you come in? I finally answered and said I thought maybe you were cleaning out the shed. Sure, Frank, thanks. Let us know the next time she calls. It's great to have you on our side. 10 minutes later, the bell sounded. Again, Frank came out with the same story. Don't you believe me? He asked. Sure, Frank. Paul and Tony did not break their pitch and catch rhythm. He's a good actor, Paul observed when Frank returned to the house. The boys returned to their game. The sun sank slowly through the pleasant autumn afternoon. Strike 3. Hoo boy, 6 in a row. Strike was mid-des. Mama swept toward them through the down the alley. Paul had never actually seen a Wagnerian opera, but he'd heard enough to believe that Mama might be a vengeance-driven Valkyrie from on high. All right. Right here in this space, or on any space you can find in your packet, you need to write your genre-based thinking job, a CSCRT. If you need some of these words read, you can look right here. Ask a teacher if you want someone to read this to you. Go ahead and pause the video and write a genre-based thinking job before you do the questions. Once you're ready for the questions, you can go ahead and get started. Make sure that you're using testing strategies. Number 8. In what ways do the details in paragraph 26 help develop a central idea of the story? If you want someone to read paragraph 26, raise your hand. In what way do the details in paragraph 26 help develop a central idea of the story? M. They suggest that the boys think Frank is acting like a wolf in the Aesop story. P. They show that the boys remember the Aesop story and think Frank has cried wolf too often. R. They tell that the boys decide to ignore Frank's warnings because they are too interested in playing baseball. S. They explain the relationship between the boys and Frank and why they get along. Number 9. The following item has 2 parts. Answer part A and then answer part B. Part A. How does Paul respond when he finds out Frank rings the bell when there is no phone call? A. He thinks that Frank has a great sense of humor and wants to spend more time with him. B. He and Tony decide to ignore the bell when it rings and continue to play baseball. C. He and Tony decide that Frank is not the friend they thought he was and no longer like him. D. He thinks that Frank wants to spend more time studying and less time playing baseball. Part B. Which part of the story best shows Paul's reaction and supports the correct answer to part A? M. One crisp afternoon, Frank's bell sent Paul racing to the house. He rushed through the door, but the phone wasn't ringing. P. That Frank, said Paul. He wants a story to tell his buddies back home. We hear about them, they hear about us. R. Sure, Frank. Paul and Tony did not break their pitch and catch rhythm. S. He's a good actor, Paul observed when Frank returned to the house. Number 10. Read these sentences from paragraph 20. A week of phone calls passed. Paul and Tony figured Mama would soon trust them so much she would stop calling. But they wouldn't let up their guard. Mama was strict and tough. Choose 2 ways that these sentences fit into the overall structure of the passage. A. They suggest that Paul should find another place to practice pitching with his brother. B. They predict Mama's reaction when she finds Paul playing baseball with his brother in the alley. C. They remind the reader that young people have a hard time making decisions. D. They They describe the feelings that young people have toward their parents when they disagree with them. E, they point out the feelings that Paul has toward playing baseball. F, they show that Paul is afraid of his mother's reaction to finding out that he is practicing pitching. Remember to choose 2 options. Number 11. The following item has 2 parts. Answer part A and then answer part B. Part A. What is a theme of the passage? M. People can be trusted. P. Things are not always what they seem to be. R. Hardship helps make a person strong. S. It is not easy to achieve fame. Part B. Select a detail from the passage that helps convey the theme. A. But Mama won't let him join a team. She doesn't even want him to practice. B. One of these days I'm going to break a leg racing in, Paul grumped. C. The bell rang. Paul ran. Silence again. After another instance, Paul and Tony caught on. D. Again, Frank came out with the same story. Don't you believe me? He asked. Number 12. The following item has 2 parts. Answer part A and then answer part B. Part A. In paragraph 2, what does the use of the phrase lunged for suggest about Paul? M. He wants to show off how fast he is. P. He is afraid he will not answer in time. R. He thinks the phone is broken. S. He has a long reach. Part B. Which detail from the story best supports the same conclusion about Paul? A. He interrupted so he wouldn't have to disobey. B. Several days later, a college student appeared at the door. C. One crisp afternoon, Frank's bell sent Paul racing to the house. D. He must think we're stupid, said Tony. 13. Which event causes Mama to sweep down the alley while Paul and Tony are playing baseball? M. Paul does not answer the phone when the bell sounds. P. Frank goes into the alley to tell Paul and Tony their mother called. R. Frank apologizes for fooling Paul about Paul's mother telephoning. S. Paul pretends the phone is ringing when it is not. Number 14. Which 2 statements explain how paragraph 11 helps develop the plot? Raise your hand if you want a teacher to read you paragraph 11. Which 2 statements explain how paragraph 11 helped develop the plot? A. It shows that Paul's mother hopes he becomes a star baseball player. B. It describes the way in which Paul plays baseball. C. It sets up the conflict Paul faces between baseball and his mother. D. It explains the reason Paul thinks he isn't good enough at playing baseball. E. It suggests that Paul is going to stop playing baseball. F. It allows the reader to understand how Paul feels. That is the end of your test. If you want to redo anything or need help with any other part of the test, please raise your hand and ask a teacher to help you. That's what we're here for.